This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. And when Hugo Ekitiké put Liverpool 2 up early in the second half against 10-man Newcastle, you'd be forgiven for turning the TV off and going to bed. At least I hope I'm forgiven for turning the TV off and going to bed. What an end to this game. William Asula with his first Premier League goal to get a point for Newcastle, the least they deserved in the 88th minute, before Szoboszlai's beautiful dummy. 16-year-old Rio Ngumoha wins it for Liverpool. It was a breathless game. Thank goodness we didn't have to watch all of it on Ref Cam. Newcastle were excellent with 11 and with 10 after Anthony Gordon's daft and poor challenge on Van Dijk, but Liverpool have 2 wins from 2 without being that good. Also today we'll talk Max Dowman and the ethics and practicalities of a 15-year-old playing Premier League football. We have Leeds, Man United and Spurs on the panel, so we'll get their thoughts on those, plus the latest transfer news, your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Johnny Liew, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Lucy Ward.
Hi, Max.
And good morning, John Brewin.
Good morning, Max Rushden.
Let's start at St James's Park then. Newcastle 2, Liverpool 3. I mean, what a game, Lucy. It was brilliant, wasn't it?
Honestly, it was excellent. And when that second goal went in just after half-time, I thought, it probably just sort of spoils it a little bit because, 2-0 up, blah, blah, blah. But I just think that Newcastle were excellent, probably better when they were down to 10. And I think it shows you as well, all these people who are trying to make football an exact science, that you can never allow it to be it's not an exact science. You cannot take account of the crowd momentum, resilience, determination, things that you can't quantify. And I think that game last night certainly showed that. Liverpool really struggled to take advantage of the extra man, but they did it in the most brilliant way right at the end, where they just drew Newcastle into Konate, and it was a fantastic goal. Ngumoha, I mean, he is not lacking confidence, and we will go on to talk about younger players, but just that sort of no fear whatsoever. And it isn't a fear, they just enjoy it. At that age, they don't have the consequences in their head. They don't have we were not going to get 3 points. They just have, let's go on and see what I can do. Hitting it first time at that decision-making, incredible. But yeah, what a game.
Yeah, just a mighty card. Ngumoha, he's 17 in 3 days, but you are 16 until you're 17. 29th of August 2008, I Kissed a Girl, Katy Perry was number 1. And Lucy's right, John, isn't she? The goal, because Liverpool didn't create much, but actually that move, and for every part of that move, it was brilliant football. And to sort of execute that in the 10th minute of injury time is sort of quite impressive, especially the dummy from Szoboszlai.
Within that 11 minutes added on, Newcastle had, for the first half of that, looked the most likely. And then suddenly Liverpool recovered their Arne Slot sense of calm and cool and passing the ball. I think it's fair to say that Newcastle were tired and entitled to be tired. And so, yeah, they just moved away slowly, deliberately, and using that extra man. No one marked the 16 till he's 17-year-old. The finish was fantastic. As Lucy said, it's one of those games where spirit overcomes, personnel and talent. You would say that Liverpool had a more stacked team, and Newcastle wanted it more. You could see, I mean, from the very first tackle, that they were throwing themselves into it. And obviously, one player in particular took this a little bit too far. With that, it reminded me of like sort of a WCW or WWF wrestling, the way that he sort of charged all the way around. It's like he ran all the way around the ring and then jumped in to do some sort of, special move on Virgil van Dijk. Van Dijk's look at him was almost like, what? Why have you done that? Because it was so ridiculous. The decision went to VAR. The Newcastle fans obviously didn't like the decision. The referee, Simon Hooper, was... Neither side liked the referee. We'll get onto, I'm sure, his new job in a bit as a cameraman. It was a red card. I mean, you cannot do that. It was. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And Newcastle, it's almost like they got too fired up. Then they found just about the right amount of fire. Liverpool were a little bit caught cold, weren't they, by how Newcastle came at them. Bruno scored that goal, and the way Newcastle fans celebrated a goal to go 2-1 down, I think Lucy's right. That set the game even more on edge because it just felt like they were celebrating an equaliser already. The whole momentum of the game was just spinning that way. It was just a fantastic spectacle, all-time League classic, and it's so early in the season. We've already had one.
Yeah. I mean, that's the really interesting thing about how Newcastle, when Asula scores, Johnny, and it's a massive moment for him, his first Premier League goal, and then he's running to get the ball to go, we can still win this, lads. And you're like, what do you do? You're 10 men, take the point. But Newcastle did have that ascendancy for almost all of that. I thought they were the better side with 11. Liverpool scored against them on a play and had a decent spell, I guess. But then what did Newcastle do, or why weren't Liverpool better, I suppose is my question.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the immense power and I guess the ultimate limitation of how Newcastle approach certainly these big games. They will fight you. They will chase everything down. They are possessed by this almost godly energy. What it means is that they will you know that you've got a game in every area of the pitch. They are incredible at robbing you of the ball or getting their challenges in. But I think what it also does mean is that they are liable to, I think, just lose their heads a little bit. Certainly you saw this in the first half an hour where Newcastle were totally dominant and just didn't have enough guile to convert all of that possession, all of that territory and all of that energy into the thing that they most needed, which was a goal. And that's fine when you have someone like Isak who's just brilliant at turning these quarter chances into half chances, into proper opportunities. But they don't quite have that poise in the final third. Gordon, well, we saw his rush of blood. Harvey Barnes, they are not quite there yet as a team that can almost modulate their emotional temperature. But it was fantastic to see. I mean, I guess the reason Liverpool weren't great is the reason Liverpool weren't great against Bournemouth. Their pressing still isn't quite right. There are enough teams in this league who can play through that press, who are comfortable enough dwelling on the ball in their own half and then picking their moments. And I don't think Liverpool's rest defense is anything like it as good as it was last season. That's why they are liable to go through periods where they're pretty under the cosh because they simply can't control the game like they did last season.
I saw somebody describe Newcastle as not having a particularly high ceiling in the group, but have a high floor. And I think that is just exactly what Johnny's just said. Not quite yet. The players at the top really, really sort of elite, high performing, but they certainly have that sort of character. But just a little point about the red card. I think that is the sort of shithouse challenge that pros really don't like. And when Virgil van Dijk turned to look at Gordon, he knew that Gordon would be sent off. He sort of basically, I bet he said to him, "Listen, mate, that's a red card. It's standing leg, weight on the standing leg, and someone comes in after you've kicked the ball is a real no, real coward challenge." And I think that obviously decision making not the best, but I think Van Dijk knew that he would be sent off, and the more you watched it, and I follow a lot of different people on Twitter, and obviously, covering different clubs, and I did see one Newcastle journo basically said a contentious red card, and I nearly replied, and I thought, no, don't reply, don't do it. But yeah, there's absolutely zero argument about that. I
likened him to a sort of crazed dog. The way he sort of he's yapping from right back to keep. He's actually almost running. He almost does a home run, doesn't he? Yeah. He does 3 bases before he gets there. But yes, Baz did point out in the WhatsApp group that dogs are generally not as stupid as that, apart from Dalmatians, he said, that are all inbred. But I didn't know that about Dalmatians. Apologies to all the Dalmatians out there if that is libelous against them. I think it is really interesting, the change from Liverpool last year, John, in that they've invested. Obviously, it takes time for new players to settle in. But Gravenberch wasn't there in the first game, and everyone was saying, well, look, you put Gravenberch back in there, that covers the centre-backs. But even still, the goals they conceded, I mean, Kirkes for the first goal, it's hilarious, right? That's terrible defending. And the second goal, how they can concede that is unbelievable.
Kirkes come back, Andy Robertson, all is forgiven. Thankfully, he's in the squad and is still a very experienced campaigner, and I think we'll see probably a bit more of him than we expected. At Bournemouth, there were doubts over his defending. There's little doubt about his ability going forward. It can be worked on. Andy Robertson was not a dissimilar player when he joined the club under Jurgen Klopp. Wirtz.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
This guy is no one doubts his talent, but he's a player that in Germany is a player that dominates the game. And what we're seeing so far is that he is a player who can decorate a game, but he's not in the centre of it. There was a point, a friend of mine pointed this out to me. After about 11 minutes, he went over to take a corner and he looked tired because the pace of the Premier League compared to the Bundesliga you ratchet it much further up. And he's having to run, he's having to press harder than he would have done playing for Bayern Leverkusen, as much as Xabi Alonso would have asked him to do that. And he's the player that is supposed to change the dimensions of Liverpool, but he hasn't done it for the positive just yet. Hugo Ekitiké, listen, we can't really complain about his impact on the team. He's scored in every game. You do wonder, though, if he himself presses in the same way as the players that he replaced. Liverpool have made this great change, brought in so many players, and it will take time. But the message is out there. If you run and chase and harry and get at Liverpool, you can get at them. And funny enough, that message was there in the Carabao Cup final back in March.
Yeah.
And Arne Slot hasn't really found a way round that just yet.
I'm not going to make the mistake 2 pods in a row of saying, a player doesn't have legs after claiming that West Ham midfield didn't have legs. Although I think maybe they don't have legs.
It amused me.
But that's interesting, Johnny, about Florian Wirtz, in that, obviously it takes time and you can't judge a player after 2 games, and we know his ability. But those things to learn, like learning, perhaps having tiny bit less time on the ball, or having to run more, those sort of physical fine margins, some players don't necessarily, some players can't do that. And so that will be interesting to see if he can sort of learn to run quicker, run more, etc., as well as do what he does so well, but just with a tiny bit less time.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting if you look at the players that come from, like the elite players that come from the Bundesliga to the Premier League. There is a period of adaptation, because certainly for players whose game is based on movement, Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, guys like De Bruyne and Haaland, they adapted, I think, a lot quicker because they weren't in that. They weren't playing in that. Obviously, Haaland didn't have to run very much, and De Bruyne's game, I think, was a lot more a lot better suited to the Premier League originally. Wirtz is a brilliant creator. I think the issue for anyone arriving on that sort of fee is like, okay, where are your goals? Where are your assists? Are you grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck? Gerrard style. This was the issue that Pogba had when he came for that fee. People wanted to see immediate miracles, and he wasn't really that sort of player. He was a keep ticking things over in midfield sort of player. And Wirtz is the same in the extent that he's not a guy who's going to get you 20 goals a season. He's not going to grab a game by the scruff of the neck. He like John says, he does decorate a game. The other issue is he is an elite presser. That's one of the reasons that Liverpool identified him as. He's got incredible reading of the game off the ball. He's incredible at robbing the ball in the final third and coughing up those big chances. And obviously that's not going to come yet. He's still learning the pressing triggers and the way they move as a team, and creatively he's still going to, he's learning what sort of runs he needs to be looking for. And that's going to take 10, 15 games. It might take half a season. And the key is going to be, can he keep enough people on side that he gets that half a season? Can he keep ticking over with goals and assists? Can he produce enough moments that are going to make people think, yeah, this guy's worth investing in?
Remember as well, Max, that Liverpool have played Bournemouth and Newcastle, probably the highest physicality of opponents in terms of pressing as well. I mean, Newcastle, there was a high level of physicality last night, full stop, but more so Newcastle and, Bournemouth. And I know there's lost players. I remember doing Newcastle against Bournemouth last season, St James's Park. I have never seen a performance like it from Bournemouth. And that is just, there's not often a team will out physical Newcastle. So I think that you got to take that into account, sort of for Wirtz, that perhaps they were a baptism of fire those first 2 games of the season.
On Newcastle, John, we're obviously just waiting for the window to close, right? And either Isak then has to send a sort of apology going, I didn't mean any of this. I don't know what you're talking about. And he scores a goal and everyone's happy. Or they let him go for not 150 million, but 110. They're trying to get Strand Larsen, who I think is a good centre forward. I mean, I don't think he's Alexander Isak, but very hard to find another one of those. But what do you think they should do? Because it's an interesting situation. I'd be minded to keep him because then he will. It's a World Cup year. Sweden, presume that. I mean, yeah, like they'll be in the World Cup. They could do. They've got a great set of players. He has to play, right?
Let's start with Strand Larsen. Strand Larsen's more your Duncan Ferguson than your Alan Shearer, isn't he? As a player, he's a pretty canny forward, and I think he's improved a lot for Wolves, but. That's a pretty underwhelming replacement for a player like Alexander Isak, you'd have to say. I'm not sure that's going to calm the waters amongst fans. Yeah, I mean, my memory of this type of rapprochement that may well happen is that picture of Wayne Rooney and Alex Ferguson when they'd had that big row. And Rooney signs a new contract, and there's his photo at the training ground. Ferguson, shit-eating grin on face. Rooney, look of... oh, God. Like, I've been totally done here. And, I've been outmanoeuvred and this sort of wan smile. And that, I suspect, is what may await Alexander Isak. There's all types of manoeuvres going on and there will be more of them. There'll be twists before we get there. But as we've said from the very start, Liverpool cough up the money. And Newcastle's statement pretty much suggested this. The conditions are met. The conditions are if the money is met. That's the deal, right? If they offer 150 million, the deal will be done tomorrow. They aren't going to offer that just yet, but they might end up doing so. But you've got this situation where, and actually, let's count the cost of last night's performance. Joe Linton, that looks a nasty thigh injury or groin injury.
Tonali as well, Fabian Schär, yeah.
Tonali's shoulder, yeah. That didn't look good. That looked a bit like Martin Odegaard's injury at the weekend. One of those where they try and soldier on and eventually he's just got an arm hanging limply. That didn't look good. It's a thin squad. It's a good first 11, especially with Isak in the team. And they need to start, Newcastle needs to get the skates on and bring in players. And it's funny, the pattern of the summer is repeated by, they make a move for Strand Larsen, it's turned down, which is what happens in Newcastle all summer. Yeah. And, you've got Ewan Wissa, who's been in exile longer than the gay traitor. It's taken a long time. It's just not happening for them. And time is running out. And Newcastle and Eddie Howe have shown what lies within that squad in that performance. I thought they were absolutely fantastic. But the fans will want players to come in and further that team. They've got to play Champions League football with that list of walking wounded already. It's incredible.
Let's talk about RefCam. Mike said it's like Simon Hooper's own Uncut Gems, which I enjoyed. Matt said it's like when cat boars upload footage of their cat cam of Tiddles running around the neighbourhood. The RefCam for the Gravenberch goal was quite good, but I mean, it's just, there's a reason why you have steady cams. It's a reason why they create those cams that are so balanced, because it's just, Lucy's exhausting.
Honestly, yeah, you only appreciate Steadicam and what the cameramen have to hold. Maybe the ref could have one of those on. He could batter a few while he's at it as well with that big contraption on. But yeah, it made you feel a little bit sick, but it's quite good. I quite liked the... I think we've seen something as well where a player had it on and just seen how fast everything is, and for a referee, how the players sort of get in your face even though they're not supposed to. I quite liked that little touch and of seeing that. And also when they have to talk out, I think it was in the Women's World Cup when the referees first had to do that, where you heard the voice, and it's difficult if you're not English speaking, but obviously our refs don't have that excuse, but you got to rely on technology. But I quite like that.
Actually, Simon Hooper's, Lucy, the first that isn't northern. He's
subtitles.
Not as northern as the others. Maybe he is, but he's the first
one. He's from Wiltshire, I think. He's
from Wiltshire, yeah, exactly. But
Swindon. Yeah.
He's from Swindon, yeah. So it's not allowed. It's a southern or a West Country ref. I'm not having that. I want them all to be like, that was a free kick up there, lad.
I was going to say the RefCam reminded me of two things. One was the 1980s, 1990s TV program Nightmare.
Yes, this? Yeah. Walk forward.
And just the sort of, and also, again back to the 90s. I've not really played computer games since then. Like Doom and Wolfenstein. That sort
Eye of the Beholder. Yeah,
front facing.
And so the ref has to go, I can pick up a gold bar or a scroll. And Howard Webb's going, pick up the scroll.
wave yellow card at Bruno Guimaraes.
But it makes the players look like they're in a computer game. I don't know what you thought of it, Johnny.
It was missing a few elements. I thought, you'd expect the whole game to be to be viewed through like the red tinted filter. Obviously, that's one feature.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
the weird blind spot, the inability to see various incidents in the and the other thing is if you are going down this route of first person reality, don't turn it off. Leave it on when he goes back to the showers, when he gets back in his car, drives back down to
Simon Hooper eating a ready meal, eating a Charlie Bigham's when he gets home.
He drives to collect his bung from the Red Cartel.
Collecting the excrement from his mailbox.
Yeah, I like the idea of not being able to. Joe Linton's got the cloak of invisibility on. You just can't see him. It's not a yellow card for him. Anyway, it was a brilliant game. So look, thank you to everyone who played in it for making it brilliant. And that'll do for part one. Part two, we'll talk about Max Dowman and the ethics of a 15-year-old playing in the Premier League. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Thursday, the 11th of September, we are playing the Troxy in London. Jonathan Wilson, Nicky Bandini, Johnny Liew, you'll be there. I met you at the bus stop, John. I think I've hoodwinked you into coming along for an exciting cameo. Oh, yeah, there's a good outfit for you. Tickets can be purchased at theguardian.com/Football Weekly Live. Still a few tickets left. Live streaming around the world. So all of you, please come. You can watch it on catch up for a week or something like that. And the link is posted on the pod description. It'll be all over our Instagram, our Blue Sky, and our TikTok, which I hear is doing great things. Lucy, you wanted to talk about Max Dowman. Stuart said, should a 15-year-old really be playing senior men's football, especially in a pressurised environment such as the Premier League? And it is so easy, Lucy, to be like, wow, this guy's 15, look how good he is. And those are all legitimate feelings, aren't they? Look, this guy is so exciting. But there is another side to this argument, I guess.
It's the best thing, but obviously and also the worst thing for a lot of the staff at teams and at clubs where 15 or an under 18-year-old, because basically safeguarding wise, he's still a child until he's 18. And I know he might behave, play like an adult. Football is now, in terms of sport, a leader in safeguarding issues. After the issues in the past, they're now very, very good in terms of checks, etc. And one thing that they have to do is safeguard young players in an adult environment. So it's all about parental consent. So Max Dowman's parents will have to consent that he can travel. So he will get changed in his own changing room. He will have a chaperone. He will not be left alone with just senior players. The people that chaperone him will have DBS checks, disclosure and barring service checks. That if you're working with children in a sporting environment, that's the criminal record check that you have to have. And I would suspect a chaperone will travel to away games specifically with him to look after him. Risk assessments for every trip, safeguarding briefings given to senior staff. So you can imagine, I'm going on, but you can imagine what senior staff feel like. They're just saying, like Mikel Arteta would be like, well, he's one of my players. I just want him to in training to play, but there's so much more that goes on, and it's someone's job to ensure that this child is safeguarded. And I know it sounds, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because the young player just wants to fit in. The last thing you want to do as a young player in a changing room of first team pros is to stand out. You want to just fit in, and then a lot of them will change their behaviour to fit in. But that's just not possible. And that's even before I get into his education. So he's going into year 11 now. So he will have, and Arsenal are very, very good, as a lot of clubs, is that he will, I would suspect, be on a full-time training programme, which means that he may go, I don't know for a fact because they probably don't release it, but he may go to the partner school of Arsenal where his timetable is changed so that he can go into training. But that's you.
I've got double games Monday morning. I'm missing physics. Yeah.
But he will. But now he's in the first team. That first team training changes quite a lot very, very quickly as well. You know, it might be, we need him in. But the school's like, and the academy staff, education staff are like, well, hang on a minute, he needs to be in school because he's doing his GCSEs, etc. So that has to all be incorporated. And it's very, very difficult, having been there myself as academy staff, to just make sure that he just is not forgotten about, but he's not here, he's not in his education session. And so this is because he's under 16. Now, when he comes in as a scholar, you know, by the law, he still has to do 2 years of education when he comes in at 16. So this is next season. He still has to do an education program. And what that will be is that it's called the SEP. It's the Sporting Excellence Professional. It's an apprenticeship. It's like being an electrician or a plumber. You are assessed around your ability as a footballer and the lifestyle and, you know, psychological skills around that. Jude Bellingham did it. I think he got his apprenticeship, and it's quite, you know, it's like any other apprenticeship. It's not easy, and you have a endpoint assessment. So there's all sorts going on. Plus, this kid, all he wants to do is be a footballer, and the parents need to not get carried away because all they want him to be a footballer. He's not signed a pro yet. You know, it is a very complex situation.
And actually, Johnny, there's something interesting about. I looked at the 20 youngest, you know, players to make a Premier League debut. Like, there's no guarantees for this guy, right? So it must be really hard to kind of balance where you put, look, the world's at your feet, you could be great, go out there, but also somebody somewhere saying, you've not made it yet because he's 15 and he's played one game, you know?
The aggravating factor here, I guess, is that it's Arsenal and he is that good. You know, if you look at that list, you know, James Vaughan could probably walk down the street unharassed, you know, same with Ben Woodburn or whatever. But this guy, he has burst on the scene in such a spectacular fashion, and it is Arsenal. It is one of the biggest clubs in the world, and the fact is, he will be famous overnight. And I think that is the part of celebrity that I don't think anyone can truly prepare you for. You know, you can sit them down and give them training and give them coaching and try and tell them what it's going to be like. But it is frankly pretty quite disorienting to be able, you know, to be walking down the street and basically have that part of you, that anonymity stripped away almost overnight. That's that's the part that he's not going to be prepared for. And the fact that Arsenal are also, as well as a football club, they're a commercial business. This guy is going to be fantastic for the numbers. How much content are they going to be getting out of this guy, or what sort of commitments are they going to be making him do in the future in terms of media? I think there's a slight tension there because obviously, you know, you're looking after him, you want to safeguard him, you want him to be focused and do his best on the pitch. But Arsenal is also a commercial organisation that is trying to garner new fans and subscribers and likes and all of that stuff. And Dowman is an incredibly potent asset from that point of view. And I think balancing or harnessing those two, obviously quite countervailing forces, that I think is the tension that I think is going to determine how a lot of young players in the future develop.
Yeah, and given your experience at Leeds, Lucy, who wins? I don't know if that's the right question, but like, how many people there have a long-term caring thought for a player? Because obviously football is so short-termist, right? We're as guilty of ever. You know, we've just half written off Florian Wirtz 10 minutes ago. But, you know, like, I don't think we did. But you take my point. Like, it's so immediate. You want this now. How many people are at a club going, look, you're 15 and actually we're trying to develop a good, happy human until they're 80? You know, no one's thinking that, are they?
You sort of get the buy-in from first team staff, but like you said, their priorities are completely different. You know, for Mikel Arteta, it's about winning. So he will let others deal with, you know, the practicalities of Dowman. But the academy staff, you know, like Johnny's just said, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that he is going to be a player. Hopefully he is. He plays till he's 35 and he has a successful career, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is what's going to happen. So it's very, very difficult. They need to have tunnel vision, young footballers, to make it. But you also need to understand that all the other things around it, the education, you know, the life skills of player, the player care stuff, shows what a learner you are. So if a player's, I used to say to players, I know exactly how you play just from how you behave in my classroom when I used to teach them before I was head of education, and because you cannot change your characteristics. If you're a little bit lazy or you let others do stuff, then that's what you would be like on a pitch. But there are academy staff who will constantly worry and make sure that they're aware of how many hours is about, whether he's getting changed on his own, whether the hotel room, if there's another young under 18s in the squad, he'll probably room with the other under 18. That's how it works, just to because obviously you got to make him feel comfortable as well. And it's then, I think what it then shows you is, I mean, Arsenal's an excellent academy, how he has been brought through the system and how the parents work with, and it's a team effort, how the parents work with the schools that work with the kid, and it all ends with this flourish, hopefully, into the first team. And so you have got a system that's working magically. There's just some people where it means a little bit more to make sure it's done in a correct way.
Players coming through young, they have a lot to negotiate. I mean, one of the players, Lucy may know, I mean, Archie Gray, I mean, he was one of those players, and when Leeds got promoted from the Championship a couple of seasons ago, he was having to change away from his teammates. He came into the Premier League last season and was something approaching an instant hit, but now is having to sit on the bench and watch the new Tottenham take place, because when you're a young player, there's oscillations, aren't there? You don't become an instant hit. Not everyone is Wayne Rooney, who I see at 16 years, 297 days old, is only the 20th youngest. So it's almost like they waited for Wayne. And it's not like with Wayne Rooney, it isn't going to be like, I mean, the famous quote from Rooney is, when he joins the Everton first team and he starts playing with them, he turns around and he just goes, "These are shite," because he realises that he's much better than every one of those players. That isn't going to be the case for anyone, even someone as talented as Max Dowman. And it is, and you actually look at that list of the top 20, it's somewhat ill-fated for quite a lot of them. You've got at Arsenal, Jack Wilshere. I mean, the lead time for Jack Wilshere, which 15 years ago or so, and when he almost arrived fully formed, but we'd heard about him a long time, and he was a great player for a few years, and it didn't happen, and injuries set in, and you wonder if managers overplayed him. And you've got to be so careful with young talent. I mean, let's not say this is going to happen, but Saka limping off with another muscle injury, you start to wonder how it's such a delicate balance for clubs when they've got these players. And Liverpool, young Rio that scored that goal. I mean, Arne Slot has this temptation to play this guy because he can do that to win matches, but you've got a player's long-term development to think of. And Wayne Rooney, we think of as a player who burned brightly and almost burned out, but he lasted a lot longer. I mean, James Milner is probably like 25th on the list or something. James Milner is almost unique from playing from 16 through to, he's nearly 40 now.
Yeah, James Milner actually was one of, I'm sure I've said this and bored everybody, was one of my lads when he first, so he was in school with me and then was in the first team straight away. But the thing about him, and this is my point I'm going to make about Dowman, it's the reaction now is when he goes back and plays in the 21s, right? So how does he cope with in and out of the first team? Because his peers will be like, wow, he's, and the lads who are under 18, the lads who are under 19, 20, 21 will be like jealous because he's just, gone on the top of them and played. So it's a very, very competitive environment. Everything's competitive. What they wear, the trainers they've got, the girlfriend, everything's competitive. So it's how he then copes with going back. Because he's not going to stay in the first team now. That is not going to happen. For reasons John said, the sort of physical aspects and the fact that you've got sort of tens of millions of players, pounds of players in front of you. So it's how the player then reacts to going back down, as they would describe it. And James Milner was one of the most perfect ones of that in terms of his attitude. It was the best attitude I've ever seen, apart from probably Lewis Cook. Those two, the best attitudes I've ever seen in a player in terms of, being an adult before the time.
Is Ethan Nwaneri now,
the elder
is
statesman.
he like some, looking? Yeah, just
look like Abraham Lincoln. It's something this long grey hair.
He's hanging on to his career, if anything.
Lewis Skelly, this positive veteran. Yes.
The only thing I was going to say, and you will laugh at this, because obviously the level is so ridiculously tiny, but I do think about the fact that I got Soccer AM out of nowhere, and obviously no one had a clue who I was, and when I got it, virtually still nobody knew, but like occasionally people would yell, "You'll never be Lovejoy, you mug," out of a van. But I think I'm so lucky that I never got any level, my lowercase Z list level of fame was when I was 28, 29. I was sort of already, I had my friends and I had my life and I knew all that stuff. I think even if at 15, it must be unbelievable. Even at like early 20s, from all footballers, it must be incredibly difficult. And obviously that you're talking, I understand before anyone yells, exponential levels of, I can leave my house. It's okay.
The two Maxes, Dowman and Rushden. That's what they're all saying out on the street, isn't it?
Yeah,
you're right, though, Max. You are right.
Anyway, before we end part two, some very sad news. Chesterfield co-owner Phil Kirk has died at the age of 59. The club announced in March he'd been diagnosed with cancer. He'd recently entered palliative care. In a statement, the club said they were confirming the news with great sadness. Their thoughts are with Phil's family and friends. I spoke to Alan Biggs, who's a Chesterfield fan, yesterday. Does Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United for TalkSport, amongst others. The message he said was, Phil Kirk was not only just a great guy, but was a brilliant owner of a football club. And we spend so much time talking about owners that aren't brilliant. And he was brilliant. And it's incredibly sad news. And also yesterday, Jerry Harrison, commentator on ITV in the 80s and the 90s. He did so much Anglia sport, like so much Norwich. Like I heard him all the time, and he did, John, have he had such a distinctive voice, and I loved him as a commentator.
Yeah, he's one of those voices that I think from 86 World Cup or 82, he's one of those voices that crops up, and he's not that familiar to those of us in the Northwest that we had Martin Tyler actually back in those days. But on Phil Kirk, I did a piece on Chesterfield 18 months ago or so when they were in the FA Cup, and the fans spoke about him very warmly. A guy at the Financial Times called the new king of the North Sea because of his business interest laying oil, which I thought was a very nice title to have, I would have thought, which showed a wealthy man who put it back into the club that he loved. And those are the sort of owners that we approve of. Is that right? I mean,
yeah, well, we're desperate for every club to have that, aren't you? Really, so incredibly sad news. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So we thought, look, we've got a bit of time. We have Leeds, Man United and Spurs fans on this pod. We start with Leeds. I think, obviously the 5-0 at Arsenal, everyone just said, look, don't worry about it. And is that the way you take a performance like that? Because you were brilliant against Everton. Elland Road would be so key. 3 points is great from 2 games, right?
I think that, the performance against Everton was good, but I think Everton were really, really poor. I think they were sort of chalk and cheese this week at home at Hill Dickinson Stadium. But yeah, Leeds were happy. 3 points is so important as early as possible when you're a promoted side. And I think there was probably no real positive thoughts going down to Arsenal that a point would be gained or 3 points. But my only worry, and I think that obviously I collect all my Leeds information from my dog walk and with the people that we meet. I think the worry is that I think they've been quite sensible in the transfer market in that they have bought physical and big players, because you look at Tanaka, who was fantastic in the Championship, and he looked lightweight against Arsenal. It looked like Declan Rice looked like a dad playing with football with his kids. He just was that sort of dominant over Gruer.
Which is interesting, because in your mind, the Championship is perhaps more physical.
And again, you're playing against Arsenal, who are, most of them are man mountains. And I think that was a lesson. But all the players with physicality were on the bench. So the new side, so Longstaff was on the bench. Metro was on the bench. There was a centre-half, Beal, I think if you're going to buy these players, then that sort of physicality needs to be on the pitch against a team like Arsenal, because at times they would Gruev and Tanaka were swatted off the ball by Arsenal. But I think you've just the difference, you're so used to winning in the Championship, it's how quickly everybody gets used to losing and then responding to a loss, and that is so crucial in the Premier League. You can get battered 5, but you've got to come back the next week, and you've got to forget that and start again. And now next week for Leeds is Newcastle. Now Leeds fans will have been watching last night, going brilliant. Anthony Gordon injured to Joe Linton. These players that very much affect the way that Newcastle play. So it's about that. It's about and I know it's something that you say each game at a time, but it's just forgetting and even if you win, right, you've still got to then go and perform the week after or midweek, and they're playing Sheffield Wednesday, I think, tonight, so there'll be much change. But I think that it's how you get used to losing more than you win, and how you perform in the Premier League.
John, Manchester United, are there green shoots?
Well, I was at the Fulham game for the Guardian on Sunday. Green shoots for the first 20 minutes, and then 70 minutes of constipated, turgid. You can insert your own descriptions here. It just felt like last season. I mean, it just, where are the green shoots? I mean, maybe in a player like Dorgu, you're seeing a bit more maturity, a bit more, he's a bit more used to the league.
Mason Mount, John? Mason Mount's
playing a little bit better. Yeah, I agree with that, Lucy. Yeah, Mason Mount's a player who listens to what his manager says, follows instructions to the letter. Obviously, has a bit of skill, and I think playing that sort of withdrawn number 9 roles is fairly thankless. And Mbeumo did not have a good time against the wardrobe Calvin Bassey, who is like lightning quick as well, by the way. Sesko came on, so I was really interested to see Sesko. And Sesko came on, and within 2 seconds, Joachim Andersen is almost straight through him, like, welcome to the Premier League, mate. And I think there was one point where Sesko showed a good touch for a big man. There was a lovely little touch down around the side. I was sat with Barney, and we were like, ooh, hello, he's got that. But that was it. He was just completely climbed all over by Fulham. Cunha showed he is, again, he's a decorating player. He's not a dominant player. And it's Amorim, who's got to front all this. He already has a slightly panicked, defensive tone to himself. I think the decision to give him the job in November is probably fatal for his Manchester United's legacy, because if they'd have waited and put in another caretaker and written off the season, then we might have had, new shoots, new beginnings. There's a certain staleness, a sterility, and oh God, I'm talking about how Manchester United are absolute shite again.
No, it's comforting. It's comforting.
I'm doing them tomorrow night at Grimsby for ITV, so looking forward to a trip to Grimsby. I just a little note of just a couple of one major tactical thing that I've noticed this season is, and Liverpool did it last night, is the wide players are closing down centre backs. And I know this is a little bit geeky, but that a few teams have done it already. So they're basically saying, we don't want you through centre. So Salah's coming in and closing down. Man United did it as well, making sure that they close the centre backs and just allowing the width, allowing the attacking teams to have the width, but not through the centre. And it's weird how it's like, and also long throws as well. It's like they've all had a conference in summer and go, right, should we try it? Yeah, let's all try it. Let's have a little bit of a go with long throws, and let's have a little bit go with changing the way our wide players press.
Yeah, I meant to say, Lucy, that Craven Cottage, by the end of it, was just a series of set pieces and long throws, corners. And we're in the NFL now. That's what it felt like. It's just a series of set routines.
Johnny, Spurs. We know how much you were an acolyte for Ange Postecoglou, but you have to, move with the times. Thomas Frank is in. How are you feeling?
He's started very well, hasn't he? He's I think not just in terms of what he said and how he's conducted himself and how he's carried himself, but the results on the pitch have been, they're clearly responding to him. They've clearly had a decent pre-season. The parts are all working together, and there has obviously been a lot of discourse about the lack of transfer business, about the Eze saga, and I do think they still lack a lot of creativity in the middle. That is their Achilles heel at the moment. They have a lot of honest runners in the middle of the pitch, guys like Bentancur and Sarr, who were brilliant against Manchester City, and Paulinho. I think you would put in that category, but not players who can unlock a defence. That's what they're going to need against, I guess, the bottom half teams that they're going to need to beat later in the campaign. Against City, yeah, they were fantastic. I think one of the legacies of the Postecoglou era is that they don't fear these kind of games anymore. That they go to City and they go to Liverpool and United and they might get a beating, but they don't feel inferior. They have a go. I think that is a big shift. And we've seen, I think, quite a lot of promise. I don't think Spurs are quite good enough to challenge for top 5 on what we've seen so far without a couple of signings. I think that losing Maddison in the summer has been a big loss for them because he's one of the players who can unlock a defence. Kulusevski, obviously, he's struggling with injury. So they do. I think they do still need that player. I'm not really, I'm not that excited by Savinho. I think the last thing Spurs need is another winger who can't score. They're full of, they've got guys like Odegaard and Matisse Tell and I like Brennan Johnson, but I don't.
I mean, he does score, Brennan Johnson. He does score.
I like him as well. He does score, but what Brennan Johnson does is he pops up at the back post after a lung busting run to score a tap in, and I know that there's a skill to that, to being in the right place and having the engine and the awareness to do that. But I don't put that in I put that in the category of a system goal rather than a Brennan Johnson goal.
Okay.
I still don't. I think in more static games, and most of the Premier League campaign is I think more static games against teams that I think are going to sit back a little bit more. I still don't think he has the craft to unlock those games.
On transfers, Everton have confirmed Tyler Dibbling, who Spurs were rumoured to, and he's an unlocker, isn't he? 35 million plus 5 in add-ons. So that's quite a fun. They play Ndiaye, Grealish, Dibbling behind Barry.
That's going to be really exciting, isn't it? But so you play them behind Barry.
Tierno Barry, we should make clear.
Yeah, well Barry.
No, he's just Barry. It's just Barry to us.
Exciting, yeah. But haven't Everton done this before when they signed 3 number 10s one summer?
Sigurdsson, Rooney, Davy Klaassen, yeah, wow, yeah. Check out Davy Klassen's hair these days. I was saying that. They've done this before. Are Everton just doing old Everton now? Is that what But yeah, I mean that is exciting. Dibbling, I saw, was that rare spark in Southampton last season. He's one of those players that is direct in his running, goes straight into the heart of defences. I think there's a bit of game intelligence there as well.
Can you imagine, John, as well, how buzzing he'll be to train with Jack Grealish every day as a young player?
Yes.
That'll have had a massive effect on him, I would suspect, going to Everton.
Do you know what? There is a lot of the young Jack Grealish about him, isn't there? Because he's a physical specimen as well, like Jack was. And Everton, exciting, happy, cheery.
Yeah, it'll never last.
I'm just come on.
Now, yesterday we were talking about, Semi Hero got in touch saying, James Trafford, being described as not the biggest for a goalkeeper, is the pod setting the bar high? Pressure on microscopic 6'5" Donnarumma if they sign him, because James Trafford is 6'6". This blew my mind.
Yes,
that James Trafford is taller than Gianluigi Donnarumma. I just won't have it. Even if they stood next to each other. I mean, Sam Downing did say he was a late developer. I don't know if he was 6 foot yesterday and now he's 6'6". But I can't believe he's 6'6".
Yeah.
He's wiry for a 6. Yeah. Can you be wiry in 6'6"? I don't know.
It sort of blow over in a gale because he looks tiny. Anyway, we'll see what happens with Donnarumma and City. Apparently, Chelsea have agreed a deal to loan Nicholas Jackson to Bayern Munich. Where's Aaron Ramsey playing, Barry? This might be the most "where is he now" Barry piece of news. Any of you know who Aaron Ramsey is playing for?
Nope.
He is playing for Pumas in the Liga MX in Mexico.
Oh.
Been there 2 months and he made his debut yesterday.
That's not Ed Mallion's team, is it?
Is that Ed Mallion's team? I don't know. Tell the listeners who that is.
Ed Mallion, former journalist, former colleague of Jonathan's, actually, is now the owner of, or co-owner of, a Liga MX club.
Querétaro FC he is the owner of, apparently. Good work, producer Joel. Jim says, do you think Gateshead fans decided to start their 350-mile return trip at half-time? Yeah, Gateshead were 3-0 down at Yeovil at half-time. You would think, shall we? And then they scored 4 in the second half, including one in the 98th minute. Moonlight Hanger says, with Torquay now starting their home games with a toddler driving a miniature car onto the pitch to deliver the match ball, when will IFAB act to ensure this is mandatory for all future matches at every stadium? Yet closer look is he might be about 8 or 9. I think getting a 2-year-old, that is a risk. Could go anywhere. Certainly unlikely to go to the centre circle. Anyway, that'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Johnny.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Cheers, Max.
Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Danielle Stevens. We'll be back on Thursday.
This is The Guardian.